All right, so here represents the last class. We have a final on Thursday night at 6, right?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. There's a study guide and up online. It's not my best work, but it's at least got a vocabulary words. This is also there. So I know you usually struggle to take notes and see what the heck I've just written on the board and that kind of stuff. So I would encourage you to sit back, relax, and everything you really need is on these PowerPoints. You don't have to take notes tonight. It's my gift to you after struggling through my writing on the board. Just a quick advertisement. In the fall, I'll be teaching a class called Ecological Genetics, which the book is called Molecular Ecology. If you'd like to know more about that, or at least see the textbook and what you might be in for, if you would take it, it's a 4-credit upper level elective. It's not in the catalog yet, but it will be under biology. 4242 is the number I give it.
Sorry, what are you teaching?
This is fall. That's ecological genetics. In the spring, I'll be teaching something called human evolutionary genetics. That's not a real class, to be a special topics class, upper level elective type thing. But that's next spring. Some of you may be gone by then, but
It's not a real class, you get a real grade.
what?
It's not a real class, you get a real grade.
You get a real grade. I mean, it's a special topic, so it doesn't. It
All of
gets a
them
number.
count towards graduation, right? Like towards our electives.
Yeah, those are both upper level electives. So one has a lab, one doesn't. I don't think. I haven't decided what. What are we gonna do with human evolution?
I don't understand that checklist.
All right. So
3 labs.
this is not chapter 23.
I'm not feeling it, bro. Just watch it.
But so tonight we'll talk about human evolution. I always think I should probably start with this instead of end with it, and then I never do because I forget. So by next semester I will have forgotten that I said that. So human evolution. So in order to sort of get anything out of that and to understand sort of our past, our own sort of phylogenetic past, as it were, let's first talk about primates and what makes primates unique. And I've done the classic thing of having too many words on the slide, so that you would just read that and not say anything. It's all there. Hands and feet adapted for grasping, short jaws, flat nails on the digits, so primates. We also, as you know, have a relatively well established social behavior and complex social behavior. The primates, the original primates were probably arboreal. Arboreal meaning sort of tree dwelling, right? Thus the grasping hands and grasping feet, and even in some cases the grasping tail. Right? But the fully opposable thumb is only for anthropoid primates, and we'll split the primates up into 2 big groups in just a minute. But one of the big features that humans have and primates have is this overlapping fields of vision. That gives you that very good eye-hand coordination. If you're going to live in the trees, you're going to need to be able to see in 3 dimensions. Have you ever been out in the sort of cattle farms and sometimes where the gate is, sometimes they have a grate on it, but sometimes they'll just paint 3 lines on the road or 4 lines on the road. Right? You ever see that? You ever see some lines just sort of painted on the road? A cow won't cross those lines. Why not?
Thinks it's a gate.
No. Cliff, something, right? It can't see. If the cow's eyes are out here, it doesn't have overlapping fields of vision like we do. Its 3-dimensional perception is really kind of terrible. Right?
So it thinks in between the lines there's like a...
Yeah, it's not sure what it is, so it's not gonna do it. I mean, now if they were like stampeding, it would probably go right out, right? But that can be an effective barrier for something that doesn't have this overlapping field of vision. Also, if you were a primate living in an arboreal life and you did not have good eye-hand coordination, your life may be very short. Right. That would be selection against. So we can divide the primates into 2 big groups, the prosimians and the anthropoids. prosimians represent those cute little guys, the lemurs and their allies. And there's a whole bunch of them out there. Like, does anybody know what a potter looks like?
Potter.
I don't know what that is. I'm guessing it's prosimian. But, so there they are, prosimians. And the anthropoids, that's the monkeys, apes, and the humans. So what we're going to do is sort of look at a bunch of phylogenetic trees, just so you can practice up reading phylogenetic trees. And so I can't let you out of here until you can read them properly from the lab. Okay? Now here they are. We are actually sort of the humans here, the chimpanzees, and the gorillas, and then you have the orangutans and the gibbons. These are all great apes. Well, sometimes the gibbon is given the lesser ape term, but they're all apes. And these are the African great apes, the gorillas, the chimpanzees, the two chimpanzee species, and ourselves. So we are most closely related to them. Now the question for a while was, what is the relationship between all three of these? And just because there's a question mark in there, does that mean they are not distinct species?
No.
Or does it mean they are, we can't really tell which one's a gorilla if you sort of, you turn on the lights and maybe feel around on it. Right? It means they're all separate species, but the relationship between them, the historical phylogenetic relationship is sort of unresolved. Well, it's more resolved than this, but in this question mark is just saying, we have a big group here, and it was really hard to tell for a while there, because what we ended up with, if you look at the morphological evidence between gorillas, chimpanzees, and humans, that leads to, what do you call that sort of trident thing looking there with the humans and the chimpanzees?
Clay.
Well, it is a trichotomy, but there's a more general term for it.
Clay.
Holly's a good start.
Polymorphic.
Not polymorphic.
No.
Monophyletic is the ideal situation.
Polyphyletic.
Well, polyphyletic, or there's another word. No, paraphyletic. Synapomorphic is not the term.
Let's start with a P.
Polytomy, right? Polytomy is a general term for that. So, a monophyletic group is a clear, clean group, right? There'd be a good bootstrap value there, and you'd have good confidence in that they broke apart. But what's that telling you? That the morphological evidence can't sort of sort out who broke off first, the gorillas or the chimpanzees or the humans. What's the relationship back there? Again, it's not saying that they're not three separate species. It's just saying it's really sort of unclear from the morphological evidence when you sort of compare skulls and you put all that into a matrix, build a tree, you end up with no resolution. But of course, the molecular world has sort of solved that little lack of resolution. And there we have the gorillas splitting off first, and the chimpanzees, as you know, are the humans most closely related sister taxa, if you want to use phylogenetic terminology. We're sister taxa. Right. Sister taxa are two taxa that are sort of under the same main branch. So, which one's more closely related to humans, pygmy chimps or common chimps?
Pygmy?
We don't know.
They're both.
Yeah, both. It was a trick question, yeah. Because you can rotate that in pygmy and common, right? If you just spin that around, does it change the tree at all? No, it changes the way they've been sort of written in the order. But don't be sort of fooled by, because they both branch off at the same place, right? So this is where they're related to us. And they're both related to us in the same way. Then they split, right, and go their merry ways. So, because you could just rotate it around, put pygmy on one side or the other side, and it's still the same tree. They're both equally, sort of equidistant, if you will, phylogenetically from humans. So, we'll put this in divergence time. So when did humans and chimpanzees diverge? According to fossil and molecular data, which seem to converge.
5 minutes?
6,
5 to 6 or 7. Some of the fossil evidence has pushed it back to 7. Although there's still some debates about the fossil information. Because it's a bone fragment, right? And then, so those are divergence times. And then we sort of put it all on the primate sort of scale. We had the first prosimians right after about 65 million years ago. And what happened 65 million years ago?
Extinction.
A mass extinction, not the biggest, but a pretty good one. Mass extinction meaning greater than 65% of, or 60% of the organisms on the planet disappear in a relatively rapid time in about a 1 million year sort of window. The Permian was the biggest, where 95% of the species on the planet went extinct. That was right after the Paleozoic era. But 65 million years ago, there was a mass extinction. Who left the planet?
Dinosaur.
Oh, the dinosaurs are still here.
Uh,
Well, who left, really? So large lizards, large marine reptiles, a whole bunch of critters left, right? The crocodilians stuck around, some other things stuck around. And then what happens after that? Usually after mass extinctions, what you see is this radiation of some group. And what you see is the radiation of the mammals after that. And prosimians are part of that. So 65 million years ago, a meteorite slammed into the earth around the Yucatan Peninsula, just north of Chicxulub, a little town on the north coast of Yucatan. There's a big crater out there that dates 65 million years ago. The size of the meteorite was bigger than the one that hit Russia recently. And had some probably big disturbance effects, but over a relatively short time, we see no more dinosaurs in the fossil record after that. No more T-Rex, things like that. They all disappear very rapidly. So, this is the age of the mammals, effectively. We get the first monkeys in 35,000 years ago, first apes 23, and then the first hominids about 5,000, and some say a little more than that. Okay? So, there's been a whole sort of story here, and we're only going to sort of cover a few because this little topic is actually a whole class that one could take. If you're interested in anthropology, you should do it, but be aware that there are no jobs in it. No, I'm kidding. I mean, I'm not really kidding. My brother has a degree in anthropology, and he's in IT now. So, but he loved it. He still would love it. You know, he never went on for the PhD, which then you could sort of at least go into academics and do whatever. Whatever we do. I don't know. But there's been a diversity. So I only want to cover a few of the hominids and just don't sort of worry too much about. There's a big diversity of hominids in the fossil record, and if you want to know more about it, great. But this is not the place for you to hear about it. But what I want you to avoid is, from 6 million years ago, we'll say, when this divergence happens, there's been a whole diversity of form. And we need to sort of put on our tree thinking hats or bush thinking hats, because we don't want to sort of put these in a parade like, this one became that one, right? Evolution and phylogenetics, evolution's not saying that. It doesn't say that the chimpanzees became human, right? It says that we share common ancestry. And that's the same with the sort of diversity of fossil hominids that we see in the fossil record. So, don't line them up. This is not a parade. So, to deal with some misconceptions about human evolution and evolution in general, again, the chimpanzees and humans represent two divergent branches that evolved from a common ancestor, which was neither chimp nor human. And we've talked about that all semester, because that's tree thinking versus ladder thinking, right? It's not become that. So, it's not a parade. There are many different sort of fossils and species of hominid, And at one point, 20,000 years ago, there were probably 4 different hominid species living on the planet, including Homo sapiens. We're the only one left. So yet several species coexisted, and we'll see that they overlap, and they probably overlapped in space and time. Also, the kinds of things that make us unique as humans, and don't get me wrong, we are unique. But there's this idea that everything sort of, one day we were a chimpanzee and the next day we walked out as a human. You know, like, oh, done with that. The different features that make us unique didn't all sort of show up at the same time. The upright posture, the sort of hairlessness that we have is generally in apes and things. So what we call it is mosaic evolution. And basically that's the way everything works, right? Things sort of happen along different lines. They don't just sort of pop. So there are at least 16 different hominids in the fossil record. This is, I think, 14 of them. You don't have to know which one's which. You really won't have to know which one's which for my class. Maybe if you got into this kind of skull morphology thing, then you'd have to know. But they're about. But I think it's very interesting to sort of note that it's not just like chimps and humans, and then you have this sort of, there's a couple maybe transitional forms in the way, but there's like at least 16 different species that are part of our evolutionary tree over 6 million years. That's actually not a long time, right? And to have 16 sort of species in our phylogenetic tree, where chimpanzees have sort of a more stasis in their evolution, the hominid side has a very sort of explosive, if you will, divergence of species. Very active on that side of the tree, shall we say. So there are several things that sort of mark the evolution of human evolution. That's brain size, almost nearly tripling from what you start with. Over a short period of time, that's the other sort of key thing here. We're talking about a relatively short period of time. In other words, we've had a punctuated equilibrium or an adaptive radiation, meaning evolution has proceeded at a relatively rapid rate compared to a more static rate. So the jaw shape, flatter faces, and changes in dentition. Dentition becomes a very useful thing in these kinds of studies, because what can it tell you if you're looking at something's teeth? What they're eating, right? Unless you're a panda. If you had to look at a panda and you look at the teeth, right? What would you guess it was eating?
Me.
Probably not bamboo. Still has bear. So if we look at a graph where on the x-axis is body mass, on the y-axis is brain case volume. In other words, the size of your brain. Then if the Homo lineage is the more modern Homo lineage, Australopithecines are what we call pre-hominids, and then there's the extent for the living great apes. So the relationship to body size, you can see that there's this is like Homo habilis, Homo erectus, Homo sapiens, and it goes up pretty quick. The brain actually sort of grows very rapidly compared to the body size in the human lineage. Right? So our brain size goes up quickly.
Do you know of any other examples where we observed an anomaly like that? I mean, where you see this rapid evolution of some anatomy of another animal?
Yeah, our mollusk diversity, there was a different time, right? So we're talking about the age of the mammals after, but mollusks, which are very diverse, those are the clams, the octopi, the squid, you see this sort of rapid divergence.
Okay.
So the fossil record shows other things doing this.
Okay.
But we're the only ones, I think, that has this sort of, with respect to brain case volume. And there have been about 400 genes tracked down using McDonald-Kreitman tests. You know those? Remember those? And I'm looking for selective sweeps or hitchhiking events to see like which loci might have been involved in the divergence and then the development of this sort of larger brain to body size. There's about 400 loci that they sort of have as candidates that show evidence of selection. So, tracking those down, let's say 400 graduate students, like, okay, you got this one, That one, remember this one? Go. And of course, there's like, as you imagine, there's tons of money out there to be had for investigating that, right? Not really. So, pre-hominids, we can break the hominid evolution into two just big chunks. The pre-hominid evolution, which includes the Pananthropus, Ardipithecus, Australopithecines, this whole gang, which were bipedal, had evidence of tool use and some evidence of language. But these are the sort of the older guys. Here's an artist rendition. I love the artist renditions. But there he is holding a stick. But that's Australopithecine, Australopithecus afarensis. That's the famous Lucy, right? And so this is just a diversity. So there's like three big groups here: Pananthropus, Australopithecus, and Ardipithecus. They go into this for pre-hominids. In the hominid evolution, and again, I don't expect you to sort of memorize all those names at all. Hominid evolution includes the genus Homo, that's Homo habilis, Homo erectus, Heidelbergensis, Neanderthal, and then Florensens, the Hobbit guy. I can't say the word right somewhere. The Hobbit. And of course, Homo sapiens. Heidelbergensis is the presumed common ancestor between Neanderthalensis and Homo sapiens. So this Homo heidelbergensis is the presumed predecessor of the Neanderthal, or the common ancestor of Neanderthal and Homo sapiens. If you kind of look at it, here's Homo sapiens. Homo erectus is actually overlapped in time, as well as Homo. They don't have the other one. Neanderthalensis we definitely overlap with, so Homo erectus, Neanderthalensis, the Florensis, and the Homo sapiens, where that's 4 hominids. They're all living on the planet at the same time. Recently, relatively recently. We'll look at sort of better pictures of that in a minute. Major changes include brain size, upright bipedalism. What advantage would being bipedal have?
See,
Why stand up? Find prey?
you can see over tall grasses.
Okay, so early hominids were probably living in savanna-like environments. See over tall grasses, maybe.
See predators.
See predators and prey. Because think about our sort of biology for a moment, and take away the weapons we've managed to build, and imagine us as a predator. What do we got?
Traps and bows.
Like, what are we good at?
Nothing.
Hand-to-hand combat? Right? But there's not a deer grappling season. Right? Yeah. Go out there and hand kill a deer.
A lot of people die like that.
And then it'd be, some people might like the challenge of it, but still, it would be a fight, wouldn't it? But what are we really good at? I mean, if we're going to be a predator, because obviously we probably were running. You say running? Okay, but we're not. How fast can we actually? Who's the
Fast is
Usain Bolt? How fast he run?
28 miles per hour.
About that, right? How fast does a grizzly bear run?
40.
40? Yeah. And a cheetah?
70.
All right. So are we really that fast?
No.
No, we're actually slow.
And our vision's not that good either.
Yeah, for distance.
Free up your hands to use tools and move around.
Right? Now you got free hands, that's good. The other thing we're good at is we are good at running. We're good at running long distance. Compared to other predators, we are good at running distance. We can wear prey down. Which most predators, if they don't get it in the first spurt, they're done, right? They don't process lactic acid so well.
I think that's what most of us do now, though.
Well-
Chasing a deer down, you'd be like, ah, shit, this is.
Right, but what if your life depended on it?
Oh, you would chase it down.
Then you would sort of trot after it,
Especially if
wouldn't
you
you?
hit a couple of arrows.
I'm just going to McDonald's. I got the dog menu.
Specifically for that.
Yeah, so it's suggested that there's, first of all, we're the hairless ape, right? But it was suggested that perhaps our abilities in hunting, besides having coordinated hunting, and the upright bipedalism allows you to have these sort of hands-free, but we're good at running distance. And what we could do is wear prey down. And if you're going to run distance, having all that hair is actually bad. So part of the being hairless and upright, because we're talking about adaptation, and as you know, adaptation, if it's going to be something, it's got to have some fitness advantage, right? What's the fitness advantage? Well, being hairless. Because, you know, as you move north, you want to be hairier. And we're not. We wear other things here. But the advantage is evaporative cooling, right? So then you can run long distance because you're not getting too tired. So, you know, at least, so possibly. But also other changes, we start to, Homo erectus at least, and we use fire. We have a whole bunch of different tools to sort of cover where the Oldowan tool tradition, Achillean, Mousterian, and Salutrian sort of go along with, but these are advances in tool technologies where Homo habilis is the oldest of the Homo species, Homo erectus and Heidelbergensis sapiens. And you'll see the different tool technologies in a minute, but they sort of get more and more advanced. We begin to build shelters, that's even before sapiens, and clothing. Neanderthals have evidence of clothing, and even Homo erectus has evidence of wearing clothing, and you'll see Homo erectus is, becomes an important player in basically the lineage here. So here they are again. I have several of these kinds of things, but I'm not going to sort of sort it all out, but they're there. Here's Homo sapiens up here with Neanderthalensis and Heidelbergensis. You see that they all sort of overlap in time, even Homo erectus. And the Paranthropus sort of come up pretty close, but didn't quite make it. But it shows large brains. So you have large brains, small teeth, bipedal over here. Small brains, very large teeth and bipedal over here. Those brains are hard to separate though, right? Terrible job making a graph. Is that green? Like which one's got the small brain? Is it us? No. Yeah.
What's the small brain, large teeth, small brain, small teeth? I can't see the difference. The reds.
The reds, small brain, small teeth, what?
Oh,
brain.
chimpanzees. Okay.
Red, green,
Oh,
yellow.
no, you said that wrong.
It's not on there. Oh,
Chimpanzees, yeah. It's the bone.
I was looking down here. Yeah. Okay. So here's the bush idea, right? It's a little fuzzy, I know, I'm sorry. But the whole thing's fuzzy anyway, because this is a phylogeny. And what do we know about phylogenies? What are they?
Hypotheses.
They're hypotheses. So we're ever certain? No, we're never certain. And if you look at this carefully, like if you look at the hobbit up there in the top left corner, where's that line come from? Right? We don't know. We don't know where it's connected. It's just sort of, right? There's a bunch of that going on. The lines are sort of, because the relationships are going to be theoretical, or they're guesses, they're educated guesses. It's a hypothesis. So is everything really clearly established? Hell no. As a matter of fact, this is very different than when I learned it a long time ago. Like there's so many more players now. Heidelbergensis wasn't around, right? We didn't have that, right? We didn't have Florensis for sure. There wasn't sort of, I don't even know who that is. This whole Paranthropus group has really exploded. They used to call it like Robustus. I don't know where Robustus went.
Is there reason to believe that there's supposed to be something else out there?
More species to help fill it in, yes. But finding fossils is slow. And humans generally don't die conveniently in tar pits and things like that, so that we can dig them up, or fall into the river and then get sediment laid on them. So, but but you can see that it's more like a bush, not a tree, and it definitely doesn't line up, right? So here's Pananthropus over here, the Homo lineages, the Australopithecine lineages, Ardipithecus down here. If we sort of look at it another way, there's an Ardipithecus and the sort of really, really old stuff, the Australopithecines, Pananthropus, and then the whole Homo lineage. And again, Heidelbergensis sits right at that sort of junction. Right, so Homo habilis being the oldest of that Homo lineage. Ergaster is a forerunner to Homo erectus.
We're not responsible for knowing all that exactly, right?
Knowing what? Like all that? No.
Yeah, what you just rambled off there.
Yeah, that was a lot.
Oh, those names? Yeah.
Yeah,
Ardipithecus, Australopithecines, Pananthropus. They're in the beginning, but yeah, don't. So I want to focus on these guys.
So were they able, like, with the whole Homo clade, were they able to interbreed with each other?
Neanderthal and human, definitely.
Yeah, because we got red hair from them, right?
I don't know what we got from them, but
That's what they
we
theorize,
first-
right?
The first, I'm not sure, like, but the first evidence from the mitochondria suggested no, they didn't interbreed, and later on, nuclear DNA, because if we follow with de-extinction, we have the Neanderthal genome, we can bring that back. Why, I don't know, but. So, yeah, at least we know Neanderthal.
Okay.
The others, I don't know. So don't worry about the names so much, right? I mean, you kind of get into it more, you learn them. But
I know, it'd be interesting to know, I'm just curious.
Is there any other like genetic evidence showing that we carry any other genes?
well, the problem is Neanderthal is the only one we have any other DNA from, because we're talking about fossils. So we don't have Heidelbergensis DNA. We don't have Erectus DNA. Right? So hard to say. And then how much is this sort of left over from being part of the same lineage and common ancestry? Not sorting that out. So here they are again. There are at least two different sort of Homo erectus lineages. They have different skull morphologies. The cartoon sort of indicates one has a sort of bigger brow than the other, but I'm not certain what the real differences are. It's that, it's hard to. They can draw it however different they want, I suppose. But here we have Homo habilis, Heidelbergensis, Sapiens neanderthalensis, and then Homo erectus. And you see that they sort of begin to overlap in time. Another just summary, but we'll just. So, the phylogenetic relationships, as we discussed, are not definitely established for any one particular species, and it definitely has not been a sort of simple road from the divergence of chimps and humans to what you are sitting here today. There's been a diversity of lineages. I know it says, I told you not to think of it as a braid, but.
Starting with the football player.
I probably should take that out if we're going to have a football team. Beat up after class. Entrance football. So let's start with Homo habilis. We'll talk about Homo erectus, a little bit about Neanderthal, and then modern humans. Homo habilis, not very different than the predecessors, the Pananthropus. The brain size is about half of your own brain size, living from 2.5 to 1.5 million years ago, so they've a million-year run, as it were. Tool maker, probable meat eater, possibly arboreal, meaning living in the trees. So here's an artist's impression of a little community, and what's that guy doing? What? I love artist impressions. It's like, what's he doing?
Put his jacket on.
He's putting a coat on, or he's holding his backpack. Ice here, here?
He's
Where's
wearing
here? What are they doing? So habilis is the first one in the Homo lineage and the oldest. But then you get Homo erectus, the brain size gets a little better, bigger, not better, bigger. And this is where you start to see that sort of very rapid divergence of the Homo lineage. Because habilis is not terribly different than the other groups of hominids, the pre-hominids. But Homo erectus stands out as very different than the rest of them. Okay, the brain size gets very big, they're taller, they stand more upright. Okay. And they use tools, their tool technology improves, possibly fire. Just over. Okay, back to that. But with tool technology, the older one tool technology is associated with Homo habilis. Some of the first tool making technology is just basically chipping rocks to maybe have a blade of some kind or something. But then you get, as you get into Homo erectus, that tool technology changes. It gets a little more sophisticated, Mousterian, and then finally into more modern societies, you get the Solutrean tool technology. You can see these are all a much more refined tool technology for building points and weapons. The interesting thing about the tool technologies is it doesn't just sort of, as you get down into the Mousterian and Solutrean and other things, especially Solutrean, the tool technology doesn't just sort of show up in one place and then it seems to show up almost everywhere in a very short period of time, meaning these populations are connected, they're communicating, right? There's trade, there's communication, they're sharing ideas in some ways, or stealing ideas, however humans sort of like to do. So, Trichinoboy is Homo ergaster. Homo ergaster is Homo erectus, but an early form of Homo erectus. This is the most complete skeleton we have. He died about 1.5 million years ago here in Japan and Kenya. Discovered in 1984, but nearly complete of Homo erectus.
All those bones were found together, like in clusters or
Yeah,
something?
he died fairly conveniently, sort of, so that fossilization could maintain the whole body. And mostly, what do we mostly find? You know, we mostly find the strongest bones in your body. You find teeth, but the bone is usually the jawbone. You find the jaw a lot, with the teeth. That's sort of, but the jaw's pretty strong. I mean, if you ever punch somebody in the jaw, right, it hurts your hand. You never punch it in the jaw. Right, so you gotta be careful when you hit them in the jaw.
Yeah.
So you go for the soft stuff down. It'll hurt your hand. You gotta do it by surprise, so they don't.
Cheap shot.
So this is just yeah, cheap shot. So anyway, Homo ergaster, Homo erectus is the first one to move out of Africa. Everybody else, all the other fossils we talked about, so far, are found in Africa, but Homo erectus is the first one we find outside of it. We find it in Europe, we find it in Asia, and we find it in Africa as well. So Homo erectus moved. Culture, organized hunting, control of fire, possibly campsites, advanced tool industry, wearing furs, things like that. So they moved. Why would you move? Why did they move?
Resources.
Why would anybody move?
Food,
Food, space, following something. But they went this way and that way, right? They went pretty far. All the way down into here. Who's the first one to get to Australia? I'm going to say 2 minutes. Anyway, they move out pretty far. And some suggested there have been droughts in the places they were living, so they're moving. But yeah, it's about resources. Just like, you don't leave when life is good, right? I mean, this place is great. I can't wait to leave. Usually by resources. Neanderthalensis covers a fairly wide range of Europe and Asia. First found in Neander Valley, a slightly larger brain than humans. Most of these YouTube links are dead anyway, so don't worry about those. A fairly large creature, right, with a broad, flat nose. Have you read Eaters of the Dead? Okay, have you seen 13th Warrior? Antonio Banderas? Eaters of the Dead is the book that the movie's based on, but there's this sort of group of Viking-like guys, and they're like interacting with some kind of mysterious hairy creature. In the book, it becomes more clear that what they're interacting with is likely this sort of Neanderthal culture. And so, but anyway, just for fun. If you happen to pick up that book, Eaters of the Dead, it's very good, or just want to see Antonio Banderas slashing through mysterious hairy guys, then pick up the movie. The movie's pretty good, actually. I thought. Looks better. But Neanderthal had culture. I spelled Neanderthal wrong. And someone else. But the cavemen, maybe. But they definitely had home sites. They definitely utilized caves. They definitely they built houses. And they had burial. What I saw is they were trying to decide, like, if Neanderthal could speak and have language, then what would its voice sound like? And you could sort of estimate that by, so they have the voice box. They can recreate the voice box. And, so Neanderthal is a pretty big individual relative to us, sort of a hulking specimen of a man. And but the voice box, when they sort of put that back together, it sounded like this. Like we have a very high voice. Like you meet this sort of scary thing in the dark alley, and then like, you better watch out. What would you do, right? Like, I should be scared, but. So I thought it was funny that when they reconstructed with the hyoidron and the voice box, they reconstructed that portion of the Neanderthal, the voice that came out of it, it sure doesn't match the morphology that I would expect it to much, not very different than what they suggested. And the tool technology definitely goes up, the Mysterian tool technology. That's one above the Salutrian, which is the finer technology. So what happened to the Neanderthals? We obviously coexisted with them for at least 20,000, if not longer. What happened to them? Did we interbreed with them? Did we kill them off? Or did we kill them off by competition? Sort of a competitive exclusion idea, competing for the same resources. What do you think?
We killed them all.
Author.
Yes, the answer is probably a little bit of everything. Because,
Depends.
okay, we know that by DNA, we know that somebody interbred with them. There's definitely Neanderthal DNA within sort of our own genome. Did we kill them directly? Let's give ourselves credit. We're really good at that. When we see something that we're not sure what it is, our first instinct is not to run over and love it. Let's go love them. That's not our first instinct. Some apparently, yes. That's the bonobo versus chimpanzee. Likely all three of these. There's probably some competitive exclusion that goes on where we're all competing for the same resources. There's also some direct interaction that results in individuals sort of making it through that interaction, and then there's definitely some interbreeding. So, Homo sapiens. Because we are Homo sapiens, we can divide that into two bits, the archaic and then the modern Homo sapiens. So we'll focus mostly on the modern ones where you basically have the fully modern behavior, ritual burying, and this is really where you start to see our culture, which emerges with art, music, and religion showing up, along with fossils, along with sites, where we really sort of take a turn for very different than everything else. Right? So where did they come from? Where did modern humans come from? There are many, many different sort of ideas. These are two ideas that sort of dichotomize the whole deal, but put it in a sort of, first of all, the regional continuity model. This one here shows that, remember, Homo erectus is the first one to move out into Europe and Asia and living in Africa. And what happens is basically by gene flow and by communication, modern humans evolve out of those lineages basically sort of in all three areas, more or less simultaneously across the whole world, from several ancestral populations in Europe, Africa, and Asia. So then there's the sort of out of Africa the replacement model, what they call the killer ape model. Meaning modern humans, Homo sapiens, evolved in Africa and then moved out of Africa and replaced Homo erectus, which was living in those areas. In other words, interacting with them in a way that would have supplanted. That's the replacement model. So this one has Homo erectus moving out and then evolving into the sort of Homo sapiens, right, in the different regions, so relatively simultaneously. This one has Homo erectus moving out and then Homo sapiens evolving in Africa and moving back out and replacing them. And the killer ape idea is that they replaced them by sort of killing them. Okay? Most of the data would support the killer ape, the replacement model. Right? Again, give ourselves credit for reasonably violent species, as evidenced by this morning. So if we sort of move closer to modern time, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, again, a good anthropology class would be, if you like this kind of stuff, then that's what you need to take. I used to love it. I should have had a minor if I would have filled out all the bloody paperwork, but I never did. Right? What's the difference? Right? I still took the classes; they're on the record. But I used to love and sit and listen to the stories. But Upper Paleolithic, as we get into the hotbed of culture, so a couple things happen. We really sort of begin to build shelters, domestication of dogs, and gathering rather than hunting becomes the mainstay of human economies. So what that's really referring to is agriculture starts to show up. And if you're going to start growing stuff, you don't need to keep moving around. So I stayed with some people in South America called the Waorani Indian tribe, and they are still sort of hunter-gatherers. But I think sometimes people have mistake that hunter-gatherers just didn't wander aimlessly. Like, I think there might be food this way. Right? What they had is this sort of system that as the seasons went on, as the year goes by, they move from place to place, and then they plant stuff. So by the time they come back around to it, it's bloomed up again. So they're not just sort of wandering aimlessly. They're just moving place to place. Whereas if you get agriculture and you really sort of do it the way we do it, you don't have to move anymore. You're growing all your food, you're domesticating animals. And then you start building cities because you become very stuck in one place, as it were. Populations get larger, things like that. So we basically shift the way we sort of interact with the environment by agriculture about 20,000 to 10,000 years ago. It becomes a mainstay of our economy. Although some other species may farm, right? You know, the dung beetles, things like that, they farm in a way. Nobody does it to the extent we do it. And all other species may do art because you can buy some like elephant art. Right? But again, nobody does it the way we do it. Whether it's because of our bigger brains or what, I don't know. But we definitely have, between art and music, those things that are we do it very well. Including cave paintings and things like that. So Homo sapiens, even the archaic, as we call them, Homo sapiens, as we like to break that down, had good means of expression, either through music, and the cave paintings are some of the ones that we can still see today. So, and last but not, so we move from, as you go through the Upper Paleolithic, you move from hunter-gatherer societies to more sedentary societies with an agrarian base, an agrarian economy. Right? But the last great migrations of humans really was across that Bering Land Strait. You know about the migrations They come across to Alaska. And most North American, native North Americans are most closely related to the Asian populations, right? So that's the ones that came over. And that was relatively recent in our past, of course, 30 to 12,000 years before present. And sort of in that migration, we populate North America, the last sort of, besides Antarctica, really, because who's going to live there? The last continent to be conquered, if you will, sapiens. So here it is again. Again, it has not been a sort of straightforward path. It's not that we are not unique, but we share, I think humans have an interesting history that we're still sorting out. This, within the 20 years since I graduated, wait, it's been longer than that. Anyway, since a long time since I graduated and sort of saw this story, I met Donald Johanson, the guy who discovered Lucy, and a lot has happened, and the story continually changes. It doesn't change so dramatically that it blows up, but we keep adding more pieces and learning more about the diversity of hominid forms that have been on the planet. And if you look at them, sort of when they existed, and look at, at some points there's 4 or 5 different hominids on the planet. So there must have been interacting, there must have been overlap. So the story's kind of fun, I think. That's it. Now, the class I'll teach in the spring is really going to get into the genomics of humans, not necessarily skull morphologies, because I don't know skull morphology that well enough to sort of, I'd have to take a class with y'all for that. So, do you have any questions on that? The final's on Thursday. There's a study guide. If you have questions, you need to get to me quick. If you have questions now, you can ask them surely, or wait till everybody leaves and ask them, or whatever. But I'll be available electronically and physically if you need to. But if you need to see me,